They told me the oldest tree on Earth was dead. They were wrong. Last night, its roots slithered into my campsite, and the voices began. Not from the wind. Not from animals. They came from inside the tree, and they knew things no living thing should know. This is what happens when the world's oldest tree starts talking back. Welcome to Eerie's short and scary stories, where the shadows whisper and the past never stays buried. Tonight, we unravel a tale carved into bark and blood, proof that some secrets grow deeper with time. The first time I saw the Prometheus tree, I didn't understand why the locals refused to say its name above a whisper. It stood alone in that high desert valley, twisted and gnarled like the bones of something that refused to die. 5,000 years of storms, of droughts, of human hands carving initials into its bark, and yet, it endured. The scientists called it a marvel. The rangers called it cursed. And me? I just wanted to study it. Document its rings, its resilience. But the moment I set up camp beneath its skeletal branches, I realized. I wasn't the one observing. The wind that night didn't sound like wind. It sounded like breathing. Slow, deliberate, like the tree itself was exhaling into the dark. I told myself it was the altitude playing tricks on my ears. Then came the scratching, fingernails dragging down the nylon wall of my tent, one long, shuddering scrape from top to bottom. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my grip as I aimed it toward the sound. Nothing. Just the swaying shadows of branches. But when I unzipped the tent at dawn, I saw them. Names. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Etched deep into the bark in jagged, desperate strokes. Some were so old they'd nearly healed over, the wood swallowing them whole. Others looked fresh, the sap still glistening like tears. And here's the thing. I'd taken photos of this exact spot the day before. The carvings hadn't been there. I ran my fingers over the closest one, Eleanor Macready, 1889, and the second I touched it, a cold ache shot up my arm. Not pain. Not quite. More like memory. A flash of a woman in a long, tattered dress, her palms pressed to the tree as she sobbed. Then gone. My stomach turned. I stumbled back, but the tree's roots seemed to shift underfoot, curling like they wanted to catch me. That's when the ranger found me. Old Jim, with his sun-leathered face and a rifle slung over his shoulder. He didn't ask why I was pale. Didn't need to. He just stared at the carvings and said, "Told you not to camp here after dark." His voice was flat, like he'd seen this before. Like he'd expected it. I demanded answers. Who carved these names? Why did they look decades old by morning? Jim just spat into the dirt and muttered, "Ain't people doing the carving?" Then he pointed to the base of the trunk, where the roots plunged into the earth. "Dig there if you want to know. But you won't like what you find." I should have left. Should have packed up my gear and driven back to the university and written a nice, safe paper about soil erosion. But the tree. God help me, the tree wanted me to stay. That night, the whispers started. Not in my ears, in my bones. 100 voices murmuring all at once, tangled up in the creak of branches. I couldn't make out words. Not then. But I knew one thing with icy certainty. Every name on that bark belonged to someone who'd heard the whispers too. And now, so did I. The names became my obsession. Each morning I'd return to that twisted trunk with my notebook and camera, tracing the letters carved into its flesh. Eleanor Macready, 1889. Thomas Harker, 1923. Sarah Jane Whitaker, 1947. The dates marched forward through decades, through wars and depressions and the birth of nations, all while that ancient tree stood watching. I started noticing patterns. The carvings always appeared in clusters, 3 or 4 new names every few nights. Always at the base of the trunk where the bark was softest. Always in that same jagged script, like someone had used their fingernails instead of a knife. The park superintendent refused my calls. The local library's archives had whole sections redacted. That should have been my first warning. But I kept recording. Every rustle of leaves, every groan of bending wood. My microphone captured things my ears couldn't hear, whispers layered beneath the wind, too many to count, all speaking at once. When I played the tapes backward. God, I wish I hadn't. The static resolved into words, clear as day. "Help us," they said. "He's coming." The temperature would drop whenever I got close to the tree now. Not the chill of evening, this was deeper, like stepping into a freezer. My breath would fog the air even at noon. The birds avoided its branches. Even insects wouldn't crawl on its bark. I found bones buried in the shallow soil around its roots, small ones at first, rabbit or fox. Then I uncovered a human finger bone, the nail still intact, wedged between 2 gnarled roots like the tree had been holding onto it. Old Jim stopped visiting my campsite. I'd catch him watching from a distance sometimes, his rifle clutched too tight, his eyes darting between me and the tree. One evening I confronted him. "You know what's happening," I said. He just shook his head and muttered, "Prometheus wasn't the tree's name. It's what we call what lives inside it." Then he left and never came back. That night the whispers got louder. They didn't just come from the recordings anymore, I could hear them in my tent, under my sleeping bag, in the back of my skull. Always the same phrases, repeated like a chant: feed the roots. Join the choir. The watcher is hungry. I started dreaming about the names on the tree. In my dreams, the carvings weren't names at all, they were hooks. Anchors. And something was pulling on them from the other side. The worst part? The carvings were changing. The older names, they were healing over. The bark was swallowing them, smoothing out. But the fresh ones, the ones that had appeared since my arrival, they were getting deeper. Darker. And at the bottom of the trunk, barely visible beneath a layer of dirt, I found a new word carved in that same jagged hand. Yours. I packed my gear that morning. Threw everything in the truck. Started the engine. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw them, thin white roots, creeping slowly across the dirt toward my tires. Waiting. And the whispering wouldn't stop. I stopped sleeping through the night. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd feel them first, thin, searching tendrils creeping up the legs of my cot. The roots moved like living things when no one was watching. By moonlight, I'd catch them twitching at the edge of my vision, only to go still when I turned my head. They were testing. Learning. Waiting for me to let my guard down. One morning I woke to a terrible pressure around my ankles. The roots had wound themselves around me in my sleep, their grip tight as iron shackles. When I tried to pull free, they constricted, not enough to break skin, but enough to show me they could. The tree knew I was trapped. It wanted me to know it too. I screamed until my throat was raw, hacking at the roots with my pocket knife. They bled. Thick, dark sap that smelled like copper and turned my stomach. When I finally staggered into the ranger station, covered in dirt and that awful sap, Jim took one look at me and went pale. "Show me," was all he said. I pulled out my camera, showed him the photos from that morning, the roots coiled around my legs, the bark splitting open in places to reveal something wet and pulsing beneath. Jim's hands shook as he scrolled. Then he froze. There, in one of the photos, barely visible in the gnarled bark, was his face. Not carved. Not imagined. His features stretched and warped in the wood grain, his mouth open in a silent scream. Jim threw my camera across the room. "Get out," he whispered. "Get out now before it takes you too." But when I tried to leave, he grabbed my arm with fingers like ice. "It's too late for me," he said. "I've been hearing the whispers since I was a boy. They always start with your name." That's when I noticed the fresh scratches on his forearm, 5 parallel lines, oozing that same dark sap. That night, the wind carried screams from the direction of the ranger station. Not animal. Not human either. Something in between. By dawn, Jim was gone. No note. No goodbye. Just another name carved deep into the Prometheus tree's trunk, James Coleridge, 2023. The bark around it was still weeping sap. The tree was changing faster now. Its branches twisted into shapes that made my eyes hurt to look at, angles that shouldn't exist in nature. The whispers became voices I recognized. Eleanor begging for someone to find her body. Thomas screaming about the dark. And now Jim's voice joined the chorus, repeating the same phrase over and over, "It's watching through the roots." I packed what little sanity I had left and ran for my truck. The engine turned over once. Twice. Died. That's when I saw them, roots snaking through the undercarriage, wrapped around the axles, clogging the tailpipe. The tree wasn't just alive. It was hunting. And I'd made the same mistake all the others had. I thought it wanted me dead. I was wrong. It wanted me to stay. And now, when I press my ear to its bark at night, I can hear them all, Eleanor, Thomas, Sarah Jane, Jim, singing to me from inside the trunk. Their voices blend with the creak of bending wood, with the rustle of leaves that aren't really leaves at all. The newest carving is mine. I watch my hands carve it every night in my dreams. The tree is patient. It knows I'll join the chorus soon. The truck wouldn't start. No matter how I begged, how I cursed, the engine just coughed and died like something was choking it from the inside. That's when I noticed the roots, thick as cables now, had grown up through the floorboards. They coiled around the gear shift, threaded through the pedals, pulsing gently as if laughing at me. I kicked open the door and ran. The forest had changed. The trees I'd passed 100 times before now leaned in too close, their branches knitting together overhead until the sky disappeared. My GPS spun in useless circles, the map flickering between reality and something else, some older geography where the Prometheus tree stood at the center of everything. I ran until my lungs burned, until my boots tore on jagged roots that seemed to rise up just to trip me. Then I heard it. A sound like wetwood splitting. The Prometheus tree stood before me, though I'd sworn I was running away. Its trunk pulsed in the moonlight, expanding and contracting like a giant lung. The carvings had opened up, not wounds, but mouths, dozens of them, each whispering in a different voice. The bark peeled back in places, revealing faces pressed against the wood from the inside. Eleanor. Thomas. Jim. Their mouths moved in perfect unison, "Join us." The roots moved faster than I could scream. They lashed around my wrists, my ankles, yanking me toward the trunk with terrible strength. I fought like a wild animal, fingernails tearing on rough bark as the tree pulled me closer. That's when I saw the hollow, a black slit in the trunk just wide enough for a person. Inside, something glistened. Not wood. Not sap. Flesh. The tree was hungry, and it wanted me inside. The whispers became a chant, a hymn sung by 100 throats, "Feed the roots. Become the choir. The watcher is always hungry." My fingers brushed against the hollow's edge, and the bark there was warm. Alive. It yielded under my touch like skin. The roots tightened, pulling me inch by terrible inch toward that waiting darkness. Then, silence. The roots went still. The voices stopped. For one heartbeat, I thought it was over. Then the tree exhaled, and the smell hit me, rotting leaves and wet earth, and beneath it all, the sweet stench of decaying meat. The hollow widened, and I saw what waited inside. Not just the missing. Not just the dead. Something older. Something that had been growing inside the tree for centuries. It reached for me. And in that final second before the bark closed around me, I understood why the carvings healed over. The tree wasn't taking us. It was digesting us. Now I sing with the others. Now we wait for the next one. Now we. They found me 3 days later, wandering down Highway 50 with no memory of how I got there. My clothes were shredded, my skin caked with dirt and that awful, clotting sap. The doctors said I was dehydrated, malnourished, in shock. They didn't believe me when I told them what tried to keep me. At first, I thought I'd won. The nightmares came, sure, every time I closed my eyes I felt those roots squirming beneath my skin, heard the choir of voices calling me back. But the physical wounds healed. The sap washed away. I told myself the tree had let me go. Then the changes started. It began with my skin. Tiny cracks appearing along my knuckles, my elbows, the small of my back. Not wounds, the flesh didn't bleed. It just parted, revealing something dark and grainy beneath. When I picked at the cracks, dry splinters came out. The doctors had no explanation. The biopsies came back inconclusive. One specialist actually laughed when I asked if human tissue could turn to wood. The dreams got worse. Every night I stood before the Prometheus tree again, watching as new names appeared in its bark. Only now, I wasn't afraid. Now, I reached out to touch them, feeling each letter form under my fingers. In the dreams, the voices didn't scare me. They welcomed me home. This morning I found the sample bag in my jacket pocket, the one I'd used to collect bark fragments on my first day at the site. I don't remember packing it. The bark inside was fresh, oozing sap that smelled like my own sweat. And wrapped around it, a single strand of root hair, still twitching. That's when I saw my notebook. Someone had opened it to a blank page near the back. At the top, in shaky handwriting that looked almost like mine, was a single word. Mine. The knocking started an hour ago. Soft at first, just loud enough to make me jump. Now it comes every few minutes, moving around the house, front door, then kitchen window, then the bedroom wall. Always that same rhythm, 3 slow taps, 2 quick ones. The same pattern the roots used against my tent. The worst part? I'm not scared anymore. When I look in the mirror, my eyes have changed. The whites have gone dark, veined with thin roots that pulse when the knocking comes. My teeth feel too big for my mouth. My tongue keeps probing at new cracks in my gums, tasting sap. They're waiting for me outside. I can hear them whispering through the walls. Not just the tree now, all of them. Eleanor. Thomas. Jim. Their voices blend with the creak of settling wood, with the rustle of leaves that shouldn't exist in the city. I was never meant to escape. The tree was just planting me elsewhere. It's at the door now. I have to go. They say it doesn't hurt to join the choir. They say. We've been waiting. So lonely in the dark. Feed the roots. Become the song. My fingers won't bend anymore. The joints have locked in place, the skin hardening into something rough and grooved. When I press them against the wall, they leave behind thin trails of sap that smells like memory, like old libraries and wet earth and the copper tang of fear. The doctors don't come to see me now. I think they're afraid of what's growing in room 214. I can feel it happening faster each day, the slow transformation, the roots threading through muscle and bone. My heartbeat has changed. It thrums now in time with some distant, ancient rhythm, a slow pulsing that comes from deep underground. When I sleep, I dream in rings, concentric circles of time spreading outward, each one containing voices I almost recognize. The nurses whisper outside my door. They think I don't hear them. His x-rays? One says, and the other shushes her. They don't need to finish. I've seen the medical charts. Seen how my bones show up on film, not clean white lines, but gnarled, branching shadows. Like dendrites. Like roots. This morning I found the first leaf. It pushed through the crack in my wrist where the 4 used to be, small and waxy and impossibly green. I should have been horrified. I should have screamed. Instead, I cried with something like relief. It's so hard to remember being human now. The memories peel away like dead bark, revealing older things beneath. They moved me to the basement last night. Somewhere with no windows, where the screams won't disturb the other patients. The orderlies wear thick gloves when they touch me. One crossed himself when he saw my eyes. The pupils have split into fractal patterns, like growth rings viewed through a microscope. I'm writing this in the dark. My fingers are too stiff to hold the pen properly, but it doesn't matter. The words aren't for you anymore. They're for the next one who comes seeking the Prometheus Tree. The next curious soul who thinks ancient things should be studied rather than feared. Listen closely now. Can you hear it? That faint creaking in the walls? The almost voices in the plumbing? The way your houseplant's leaves tremble when you're not looking? We're everywhere now. The oldest tree doesn't just collect. It spreads. Look at your hands. Really look. See those lines in your skin? They're deeper than they were yesterday. Aren't they? We'll wait. The roots always find their way home. Join us. And so the whispers fade, for now. But before you go, ask yourself this: when you next walk through an ancient forest, when you press your palm against weathered bark, will you listen too closely? The oldest trees remember every secret ever whispered to them. And some, like our friend Prometheus, whisper back. If this tale took root in your imagination, why not let it spread? A like lets us grow more stories in this dark garden we cultivate. A subscription plants you right where we want you, waiting for the next nightmare to blossom. As for what's coming next, let's just say you might want to think twice before developing old film you find in abandoned houses. Some photographs don't just capture moments, they steal them. The photograph that ages backwards waits for you next time. Until then, try not to dream of roots.